Right. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to Tax Law Basics for Legal Aid Clients. My name is Alexis Alvarez. I am the Director of Statewide Training at Florida Legal Services. I'm always very happy to be in the learning community with you all, but I'm extremely happy today because we are kicking off a training series that we developed that's going to focus on tax law, business entities, and tie it in at the end with domestic dissolution of marriage, and really the intersection between all of those fields and sort of the important aspects of what to identify and how to be more cognizant of what you need to know in order to represent your family law clients in their dissolution of marriage. So I think for most of my legal aid folks who are on here, we know that these aren't topics that we explore too often. And so with that being said, I'm very, very thankful for our speaker who's with us here today, who has an immense amount of experience in tax law and is going to walk us through some of those basics in our first session or installment of this exciting training series. So some other housekeeping announcements before I move into introductions. This is being recorded. A copy of the recording will be sent to you all who are here live and anyone who registered. So if you have to run out and put out the fires that you're always putting out, doing the great legal aid work that you're doing, we understand. Don't worry, you'll receive the full recording regardless of if you have to hop off early. Second housekeeping announcement is questions and answers. We really want this to be interactive. We don't want you to be shy. We know that this is a topic that we as legal aid lawyers don't get to explore as often as we'd like. So please, please, please put your questions into the chat or the Q&A. Since our presenter is presenting her slides, she will not be able to see the questions in the chat. So I will be presenting them on your behalf to her. So, drop them in as they come up so we can answer them as the topic is fresh. That's our preference, and don't be shy. We like to hear from you. And the last two pieces of housekeeping announcements are that this was approved for CLE credit. I will be posting that CLE code into the chat at the end of the presentation. I will also say it out loud. You will also receive that CLE code along with the recording 24 hours after the event in an email from Zoom. I'll put all this into the chat, so don't worry, but you will get your recording, you'll get your CLE credits, and most importantly, you will get your knowledge. And so the last piece of housekeeping announcement is a little untraditional, exciting. Our speaker today just had a baby. I am due any day to have a baby. So we want to put that disclaimer out there and say, if my water breaks or something happens on this webinar, we appreciate your patience and grace with us. We are hoping none of that happens, but we do want to let you know. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce our speaker here today, Karen Lapicus. Karen is a Florida Board Certified Tax Attorney with Lapicus Law. She is admitted to practice law in Michigan, New York, and Florida state courts, U.S. District Court for the Southern District of Florida, and the United States Tax Court. Prior to founding Lapicus Law, Karen worked as a senior attorney with the IRS Office of Chief Counsel. In that role, she was the lead attorney for the IRS in over 170 cases in the United States Tax Court. Also, as a former special assistant United States attorney, she represented the United States interest in collection of tax liabilities in bankruptcy court. Karen teaches federal tax practice and procedure at the University of Miami School of Law as an adjunct professor and is chair of the South Florida Tax Litigation Association, on the board of directors for Legal Services of Greater Miami, the board of directors for the tax section of the Florida Bar, and the board certification committee for tax for the Florida Bar. And I know I already bragged about her immense experience. Now I read it out to you so you all even know. We are so incredibly lucky to have you, Karen, here. Thank you for dedicating your time to give us in the legal aid community this much needed training. The floor is yours.
Thanks, Alexis. In respect to not being shy, asking questions during this, I also want you all to know, don't be shy in the real world either. When you come across tax issues, you do not need to try to navigate them yourself. There are a ton of tax attorneys that I know that would be willing to hop on a call with you, mentor you in a case, anything. So again, don't feel like you're alone. There's a huge, the Florida Bar tax section, the ABA tax section, they're all here with, full of attorneys that are willing to help. So don't, bang your head against the wall too much on tax issues. You're not alone. So let us do some of that head banging for you. So anyways, I'm presenting on tax law basics for legal aid clients. And a lot of people think, okay, legal aid clients, low income clients, why would they ever have tax problems? They don't, most of them don't pay taxes, right? So why would they ever have tax issues? In fact, they have often more tax issues than the middle class. And unfortunately, that's, in the system that we live in, it shouldn't be the case, but it is. And why is that? Here are some of the common problems that you may come across low-income clients they have. One, they're targets of unscrupulous tax return preparers. You drive down the street, you see people waving signs advertising huge refund claims. Get 2 tax refund checks this year. Get 6,000 EITC. These are often tax return preparers that steer low-income clients wrong by preparing bad returns that claim deductions that they're not entitled to, maybe tax credits they're not entitled to, which starts a domino effect of tax problems in the future for these individuals. Or you have people who aren't familiar with tax filing requirements. They don't even know if they have to file a return, so maybe they don't. The problem with this is not necessarily that they're not paying taxes that they owe, but they're not getting tax credits that they're entitled to. The earned income tax credit, this is the tax credit we hear about the most, and we hear about it in the context of, oh, there's a lot of fraud with respect to the EITC. But another problem with the EITC is that all the people that are entitled to it are not claiming it. And this is a relief from, this is supposed to be a credit that pulls people out of poverty. So it's extremely important that people that are entitled to the credit know about it and claim it. Low-income tax, low-income clients also aren't aware that they can file their tax returns for free. There are clinics across the United States, across Florida, that are available to help individuals file their tax returns for free, rather than going to these people waving signs on the street that often charge upwards of $200 to prepare their return. They may keep a portion of the refund, wrongfully, that's issued to the client, on top of preparing inaccurate returns. So know that there are resources for helping low-income clients prepare returns for free. Low-income clients have a higher rate of IRS audit. This is something that practitioners suspected for years, and now it's proven and documented. And low-income clients often don't receive IRS notices that are issued to them because they move a lot. They don't update their address with the IRS, or they don't file returns that update their address with the IRS, so they miss notices. Or when they receive the notice, they don't understand it. I mean, the most educated people, I've got clients who are attorneys that don't either read or don't understand an IRS notice issued to them. And it's in English, and their first language is English. But we have clients, low-income clients, whose first language is not English. So these notices are issued in English, so they don't even, they clearly don't understand it. Fortunately, the IRS is now issuing notices in multiple languages and has multiple resources now available to communicate with taxpayers in other languages. But again, a client needs to know how to tap into those resources and to be able to take advantage of them. Once someone gets audited, everyone wants to know, well, what triggered it? Or how do I avoid an audit? Anybody that claims to know exactly how a tax return is chosen for an audit is feeding you a load of lies. It's one of the highest guarded secrets of the IRS of how a return is chosen. They're chosen pursuant to algorithms. And again, so I'll tell you my suspicions, which are, about how a return is likely to be chosen for audit. And that's if someone earns a high income, extremely high income, they're more likely to get audited. Something that almost always triggers an audit is if you claim the same child on tax return as someone else. Now, this is an issue that will come up. You're going to see it with low-income clients, and I'll explain what to do when this happens. If someone has unreported income, now that 1099s, W-2s, all of these they're filed either electronically or certainly they're processed in the computer database now. So the IRS computers merely run, and if a 1099 that was filed doesn't match up to income that was reported on a return, automatically it will flag, look, there's something wrong here. And there may be like a computer generated audit in those situations. This is another problem with low-income clients, because they do tend to move more frequently. They might not receive these wage and income tax returns like a 1099 or a W-2. So they may forget about a job that they held for a short period of time, forget about a small amount of income, and not report it on a return, which triggers an audit. I'll explain later how they can access these themselves. So you do not necessarily need to receive a 1099 to have to know whether one was filed. You can access it through the IRS website yourself to look up all these returns that were filed in your name. Sometimes these are filed wrong. So maybe somebody's being, vengeful, or it could be a mistake that somebody files a 1099 reporting they paid you income. There are procedures in place to address this. Just because someone files a 1099 reporting income that they allegedly paid to you doesn't mean you have to report it. This was actually a question on my exam in the University of Miami tax law program just last fall. Is if somebody reports money paid to you, but you didn't actually receive it, do you have to report it? And the answer is no. Certainly, you have no obligation to report income that you didn't receive. You may be audited, but you can deal with it at that point. Certainly, don't have to pay tax on that money, or shouldn't have to. Individuals that claim the earned income tax credit are audited at a higher rate than almost all Americans. Again, and who claims the earned income tax credit? Low-income individuals. So the only people that are audited higher are some like the richest Americans. If someone claims large charitable donations, they're more likely to get audited, especially in comparison to their income. You're going to see this a lot with individuals that use these unscrupulous tax return preparers. They show large charitable deductions even though they have a low income. Again, that's extremely unusual for someone to be able to be so generous when they have such a low income. Or if someone claims Schedule C income, a Schedule C is self-employment income. If someone has a side job or a sole proprietor, and they didn't create a separate entity, they'll report their income and expenses on the Schedule C. Well, we see these unscrupulous tax return preparers create Schedule Cs showing, businesses that didn't actually exist. Why would you do that? And they report income on it. Why would they do that? Because they're trying to get the earned income tax credit. You have to have earned income to qualify for the tax credit. So you'll see these tax return preparers create this earned income, report earned income on the Schedule C, even though they didn't actually earn the income, which creates an interesting situation for the IRS, because you'll see the IRS in these EITC cases actually alleging that someone did not earn income. That's not something you expect the IRS to do, but that's what they do in the earned income tax credit, saying, hey, you reported you made $15,000 last year. We don't believe you, prove it. So that puts the client in the situation of having to prove that they made money. How do you do that? By, having invoices from clients, showing bank accounts, showing deposits into bank accounts, etc. Or if another audit triggers unusual tax credits, you'll see low-income clients on these returns claiming fuel tax credits and credits that you'd only see farmers take. Like, you'll know it when you see it, that'd be unusual for someone to claim because you probably haven't heard of it before. I always show this slide in my class because it's alarming. This shows where someone, I'm having trouble with the slides, it's moving too fast here. The rates of audit by county across the United States. And you'll see the highest rates of audit are in the South and in lower income areas. Interestingly, the county with the highest audit rate is Humphreys County, Mississippi, and the median income is only $26,000. Their audit rate is 51% higher than this Loudoun County, Virginia, where the median income is $130,000. So that's why I say low income and minority taxpayers' concerns are not hypothetical. It's real. In fact, just last month, the New York Times and the IRS released a report showing that if you're a Black American, you are 3 times as likely to be audited by the IRS as other taxpayers. Now, the algorithms the IRS doesn't keep track of someone's race or ethnicity, but there's something about the algorithms that as a result choose Black taxpayers at 3 times the rate as other taxpayers to be audited. So fortunately, this is something that should have been done years ago, but now that they know that this is the effect of their algorithms, now they can go and figure out, why is this? Because there's clearly a bias in how the tax laws are being enforced. I keep mentioning the EITC, and that's because it is such a big issue with low-income taxpayers. So let's understand it a little bit. Why is the EITC such a big issue for low-income taxpayers? And if you could look here, if someone has 3 or more qualifying children, they can get an earned credit of over $6,900. That's per year. And this is a refundable credit, meaning you don't have to have paid $6,900 in taxes to get this amount back. You don't have to have paid any taxes. You merely, have to show you qualified for the EITC, and you can get this amount paid to you on top of the other credits, the child tax credits, etc. So you can see the incentive for people like these tax return preparers to get somebody to qualify for the EITC. You don't need children to qualify for the EITC. You could get an EITC credit, this credit up to $560. But these are the maximum adjusted gross income of an individual for them to qualify. So for example, if somebody has 1 child and they're single, they can make up to $43,400 dollars and still qualify for the EITC. And this is explained that it's a refundable tax credit. So you don't have to owe any tax to get a refund. You don't have to have paid any tax to get paid the refund. So it's called a refund, but it's a credit. How does somebody qualify for an EITC? They need to have a Social Security number that's valid for employment. this comes up, this is an issue with recent immigrants. If their social security number is not valid for employment, if they don't have one valid for employment by the due date of their return, then they don't qualify for the EITC. If they expect it, say April 15th is coming up and they're expecting their social security number to come in and they don't have it yet, they could file an extension. This is a great example of a situation where someone should file an extension, because as long as that they get that social security number by the time their return is due, including the due date of the extension, they'll qualify for the EITC. So in those situations, they should file an extension and then have until, say, October 15th to get that valid social security number and file the return so they can get the credit. Their qualifying child, the child listed on their return, must also have a social security number valid for employment by the due date of their return. This is another problem. Sometimes, immigrants don't get their children's social security number until later. Unfortunately, they won't qualify for the EITC until it comes in. I keep track of time here. It's going so fast.
And that's okay, Karen. If you end up running over, it's still going to record. And
Okay.
so don't worry about it. Take your time and do what you need to do.
Okay. So to qualify for the EITC, something unique about this credit is you have to have earned income from employment or from self-employment. Let me try to get through. Let's see. If you don't have a child, you could still claim the EITC as long as your income is below a certain level, you lived in the US more than half the year, or a certain age, you get disability income, or are a member of the military. So these are all things I don't expect, legal aid attorneys to know. Just be aware that these issues are out there so that you can issue spot. And again, these are things, if you suspect that someone might be entitled to this credit, didn't claim it, maybe because they just didn't file a return, or maybe they claimed it and were entitled to it. In the future, it'd be a good idea to refer them to one of these clinics that prepare tax returns so that they can claim it properly going forward. Or, file amended returns to claim a credit that they might have been entitled to in previous years. And you can imagine if someone was entitled to the $6,000 credit, hadn't been claiming it, they could go back generally up to 3 years in the past and claim it to get that amount. To maximize the EITC, somebody has to have a qualifying child. And what's a qualifying child? That's if someone is, they could be, any age of disabled or under 19 and younger than you, or if they're a full-time student, they can be up to 23 years old. They have to be a son, these are the relationship tests: son, daughter, stepchild, adopted child, or even half-sister, stepsister, stepbrother. The biggest thing is that they have to have lived with you for more than half the year. So the residency requirement, and this is the one that when the IRS audits taxpayers, this is the one they focus on. It's easy to show the relationship and the age of the child, but the residency requirement, this is the most important. So how do you show that your child lived with you for more than half the year? School records showing the address, doctor's appointments, just any kind of records, school papers, photographs, testimony from other, neighbors, from other family members. What if there's another parent that wants to claim the child? So only one parent can claim the child on their return. So if two parents, if say the child lived with both parents equally, then you go to the tiebreaker rules. And the rule is that, well, generally, whoever the child lived with the longest may claim the child. But if that's equal, it's the person who had the highest AGI, essentially the highest income for that year, that gets to claim the child. Let me go back. I don't know if I have a slide on this. So something that always comes up is, what if the other parent claimed the child on their return, but they shouldn't have? This comes up all the time. And in that case, say the other parent claimed the child, filed their return electronically. When the parent that's entitled to claim the child on their return goes to file a return electronically, the IRS won't accept it. So this causes a lot of panic. Well, look, now the person can't even file their return. And there are people that will then advise that person, okay, then don't claim the child on return. You can't. So remove the child from the return and file your return electronically. That's not the right advice. The advice that should be given is that you claim the child that you're entitled to claim on your return, and you paper file it, meaning you print off the return, sign it, and mail it to the IRS. You can't electronically file it. That's unfortunate, but you can still claim the child if you're entitled to, and you should. You can expect to be audited, unfortunately, but you can be prepared for that. You know, it's the only way to get above the fact, you know, to get over this, to finally bring it to the attention of the IRS that this other person should not be claiming the child, is if someone else also claims it. So again, if you can't file a return electronically for some reason, it may happen for other reasons where the IRS rejects an e-file, you can still file. You file by paper, the old-fashioned way. There's also a child tax credit. This is in addition to the EITC. It's a lower amount. You get this, you know, it's either $2,000 or $3,000 per year per child, depending on their age. And it maxes out at $2,000 or $3,000 per child. In this situation, so a mistake I see a lot of IRS agents making with the EITC is they want the parent to show that not only did the child live for them for more than half of the year, but that they provided more than 1/2 of the financial support. But that's not the test for the earned income tax credit. It is the test for things like the child tax credit and whether the child can be claimed as a dependent on the return. Again, these are probably not things you're going to be able to remember unless you do this every day. Just be aware these issues are out there. So for the child tax credit, some of the same, you know, they have to be under 17 years old, have a social security number that's valid for employment, have to meet the relationship test, you know, son, daughter, half brother, half sister, stepchild. This is the hard part. They cannot have provided more than half of their own financial support during the year, or somebody else could not have provided, you know, that financial support to them. So basically, if somebody else is entitled to claim the child, you can't. They're properly claimed as a dependent on your return. And why would they be properly claimed as a dependent if you provided more than 1/2 of their financial support? So this element is one of the hardest things to prove in an audit, the financial support aspect. I won't go through this. This is boring stuff, but okay, yeah, what if somebody else claims your child on the return? Again, you claim the child that you're entitled to claim on your return. And if you can't file electronically because somebody else filed first, you mail it in. Alexis?
And two questions came in. I'm sorry, I missed one that came in a little earlier. It says, and so I'm sorry, it's going
I
back.
see it. Yeah, I can, if you can't qualify, you cannot qualify for an EITC with the TIN. Only if I don't think so, because I think the the TIN is a taxpayer identification number. If that doesn't, if that is not valid for employment, is not valid for claiming the EITC. So I think it will turn on whether it's valid for employment, and I suspect it's not. So the other question is, can one parent claim the child as a dependent and the other parent claim the child for EIT purposes only? Yes, I believe that's true. This trips up the IRS also, because there is a different test.
Awesome, thank you. I'm
Yeah.
sorry I missed that one
Mhm.
earlier.
It may cause problems with filing the return, though. It may be kicked out of the electronic filing because the same Social Security number will be on both returns. I wish I could research that question, but I believe that is the case, that you can claim the child for different purposes on the two returns. Let's see how to advance slides. So how do we get information from the IRS? Because a lot of people do not know what is going on. Client comes to your office, they get notice from the IRS, but they have no idea what returns were filed, and this is often, if they go to these tax return preparers that, these, I don't know what else to call them, unscrupulous tax return preparers, they'll file returns for a client, not give the client a copy of the return. That all the client knows is how much money they got back from the IRS. They don't know how it happened. So how do you go back and figure all this out? And this would come up in divorce situations, because you want to figure out what was filed and reported to the IRS. The online account with the IRS is extremely valuable, and not enough people know about it. But hopefully, the client can go to irs.gov and use this service here to create and to sign in to, let me see, into this online account. There they can make payments. They can even enter into an installment agreement. But most valuable to me of all of this is they can get their account transcripts. They can access access tax records. They can see what was filed and reported on their tax returns. They can see what economic impact payments were sent to them. Their advanced child tax credits. This stuff is not as relevant anymore post-COVID, but get copies of notes, some of the notices the IRS sent them that they may not have received. This is an example of a tax account transcript. It is the most valuable piece of information to me that I can get from a client to know exactly what has happened with their tax accounts. It's going to show you, let me get the pointer here. It'll show you what they owe. Trying to figure out this annotation thing. Let's see, like here you can see what they owe. This is for 2010 for their 1040, their individual income tax return. It's going to show how they filed, head of household, the amount of income they reported, when they filed it. Here they filed on time, return due date or receive date, when it was processed, and it shows the story. This is the story of everything the IRS has done. There was an audit. This is when it was closed. These are the penalties. This will actually tell you the statute of limitations on collections. That's a whole other CLE, but generally, this is the date until which the IRS can collect the tax. Generally, the IRS only has 10 years to collect tax. So we want to know before doing anything for a client when that date expires, if they owe money to the IRS. Because we don't want to do anything that could jeopardize that date. For example, if it was, December 1st, 2022, we would not have wanted to enter into, like, propose an offer and compromise to resolve this liability. Perhaps we would have wanted to just wait a couple of weeks until this balance fell off the books. It's going to tell you that there was a notice, a levy on Social Security. Yes, an individual's Social Security benefits can be levied. A lot of things that people don't, expect to be possible, the IRS can do. For example, they can foreclose on individuals' residences, even if they have a homestead exemption. This person's passport was certified seriously delinquent. This will cause an individual not to be able to renew or get a new passport. This is easy to resolve. If someone needs to travel and they don't know if the IRS has certified their passport, well, it's not certifying the passport. But in any case where somebody has, it's called seriously delinquent tax debt, the IRS can make a referral to the State Department to indicate that this person has seriously delinquent tax debt. This causes that individual not to be able to renew their passport or get a new one. How do you get that reversed? And that's by proposing an installment agreement in good faith. You don't actually have to have entered into one. Merely proposing one is sufficient. And at that time, the IRS is supposed to notify the State Department that the tax is no longer seriously delinquent, so that person can renew their passport. Proposing an offer in compromise, entering into an installment agreement, paying the debt. There's lots of ways to get this certification reversed. Here you can see that it was reversed, and this happened within a month of there being a pending installment agreement. Just saw another. Alexis, I'm actually able to see the questions come in. Stacy asked, as you stated, taxpayers miss getting notices. If the taxpayer has been a victim of fraud and was issued a PIN for electronic filing purposes, will they be able to see the copy of this notice online when they get it in the mail? Oh, I don't know. Yeah, because sometimes they get a notice for the PIN and then they lose it. So they don't have it when it comes time to file the return. I don't know. I guess you just have to log into the account to see if it's available. I suspect perhaps it's not available because there's limited number of notices that are available online. But you can always try. So what's the other way to get information from the IRS? You've got the online tax account. If you can't log into the online tax account and say you need a copy of your tax return, you can file this form, a 4506. The IRS does charge $43 per copy of return. The problem with this is it takes a really long time. It can take months before you actually get a copy of that return. Or you could file this form to get a transcript of the return, which for most purposes is good enough. This can take time too, because you send this in and you have to wait for it to be processed and get it in the mail. You can always call the IRS and request a transcript as well. And they'll mail it to you. You should have it in 10 days to a couple weeks to get it in the mail. What if you need things other than an account transcript, tax return transcript, or a copy of return? You can submit a Freedom of Information Act request. These are very easy. The instructions are online to get files. And this may come in handy in the divorce cases where you want to see what's, what has happened, what's been, maybe one spouse was communicating with the IRS, but you don't know exactly what was communicated. You can do a FOIA request. Unfortunately, though the IRS is supposed to respond within 20 days, most FOIA responses are coming after months. So it's not, certainly you have the right to sue for a response after those 20 days have passed. Don't know if that makes much sense in most situations. But you do end up getting the documents pursuant to a FOIA request. Unfortunately, it's just taking many months to get them.
And a question that just came in the chat, which I'm not sure if you can see.
Oh,
it,
okay, yeah.
says, how much do you have to pay for a hard copy transcript request?
Those are free. Those are free. I do those all the time. I'll request a lot of them. Fortunately, those are all free. And again, ideally, the client logs into their irs.gov account and pulls them down themselves so you can get them faster.
Thank you.
Yeah. So what if somebody doesn't have to file a tax return? And why would they not have to file a tax return? Because they don't make enough money to meet the filing requirements. I almost always recommend that they do anyway. And why is that? Because if they don't file a tax return, somebody else may, pursuant to identity theft or tax fraud. Like you want to be the first one to file your own tax return. Unfortunately, there's a lot of people out there have stolen Social Security numbers and file fraudulent tax returns so that they can get refunds from the IRS. One way to prevent somebody from doing that is for you to electronically file your return first. It's also a way to update the IRS of your address. Certainly, there's other ways to do that, like filing a Form 8822, but most people don't think, oh, I moved, I need to let the IRS know where I am. Usually they wait until they file a return to let the IRS know that they moved. It's also helpful to determine whether you might be entitled to credits. Even though you don't have a tax liability, as we saw with the EITC, maybe you're entitled to money, like to money back. By preparing a return, it's a way to find out. You don't have to actually file, but you can go through the exercise of preparing it. And as we saw in COVID, where this was a unique situation, people who didn't file their returns for many years didn't get the economic stimulus payments automatically. They had to jump through many hoops to get them because the IRS didn't know where they were, know how many children they have, know where to send them, or whether they'd be entitled to the payments. So though there's not a program like that now, you never know. So that was a situation where there was many people that had wished they'd filed returns previously, even though they didn't have to. Oh, I see that. I see the chat. What's the amount of money at which a person must file a tax return? I think I've got a slide coming up with that number. And I don't know off the top of my head. I don't prepare tax returns. I'm not an accountant, so I give that disclaimer. So there's a lot of things an accountant could tell you that I can't. But I think I might have a slide here coming up. Oh yeah, I do. Here's the form that you can file with the IRS to notify of address changes. Look, notifying the post office that you changed is not the same as notifying the IRS. The law provides that the IRS only has an obligation to send notices to your last known address. This creates a problem because they can fulfill their legal requirements to send notices to the last known address only. So you could have moved and not actually received a notice of an audit, an amount due, and it's your fault, unfortunately, for not notifying the IRS of your updated address. So it's always a good idea to advise somebody when they move to file this form. The IRS website has an app, or I don't know if it's an app, but it's like a test that you can enter in your information and they will tell you whether you need to file a tax return. And this will also be good. I think they also tell you whether you might be entitled to credits. So this is a good exercise to go through if someone's not sure. But here are the filing requirements. If you're single under age 65, you make under essentially $13,000, you don't have to file. Married filing jointly under 65, you make under about $26,000, you don't have to file. However, again, if you have children, you may want to go through the exercise of preparing a return just to see whether you might be entitled to some credits, some money, if you do file. Let me see this. Someone asked, how can I check if an IRS publication is current? You can't find it on their website. Oh, okay. I wonder if you asked the same question earlier, whether one person could claim the EITC, the child for purposes of the EITC, but not the, I would suspect that if it's not, if it's not still available, then it is not current. But one thing to remember is that the IRS publications, let me see if I can shut my phone off here, are not law. So, let's see. I'm reading Lynn's question. I don't know if everybody else sees the question or if I should read it out loud.
I can read it out loud.
Okay.
So it says, first and foremost, thank you so much for doing this. Karen is providing so much crucial information. A big problem that we have is opposing parties who have to pay us attorney's fees are sending 1099s indicating the fees are income for the client. You can imagine that this is a big hit for our clients. The problem is there is a basis for doing so, but legal aid clients can't get around that requirement. Will this type of thing be addressed in this presentation? If not, no problem if it's outside of the scope.
No, I mean, that's something, because so the 1099 would be issued to the client even though the payment is actually made to legal aid. Is that correct? It sounds like that's what's happening in this situation.
Yeah, I think so.
In this case, I usually advise the person to, one, if they can't get the payor to correct the 1099, then you report that amount on your return and then see if you can deduct the amount, the payment, where you report it as income, but at the same time report the deduction. And don't hold me to that, because not all attorney's fees are deductible, or because otherwise you're gonna get audited. First, you need to determine whether it is income to the client, and if it, and whether you can claim the deduction. Trying to think of a situation. I'm gonna brain freeze here.
That's okay. We can always revisit it at the end.
Like, these are situations like you could always feel free if like you're stuck in a situation, don't know what somebody should do, because it can depend on the situation, and the type of fees and the type of work, if it was related to business or it can depend on how to report that. So, and always, if you're stuck with a client and don't know what to do, then you can always reach out. If I can't, you don't have the tax attorneys available to, that work pro bono, let me know and I can try to connect you with people.
Awesome, thank you. Lynn just posted into the chat, yes, the money we're receiving for fees, there's a basis for doing so, but there's a private letter ruling. Legal aid attorneys can use that to try to get around it, but it's a huge issue being addressed nationally. So I think it's a little outside of the scope of what the purpose of this webinar is, but I appreciate you, Karen, being willing to answer any follow-up questions or maybe point Lynn in the right direction. I'll put your contact information in the follow-up communications to everybody.
Okay. does that include non-taxable income in terms of whether needs to file tax return? Like, trying to think like gifts or loans? I'm not quite sure I understand the question. Here's a situation where someone may sell their primary residence, and that income may be excludable from their income. They still have to report it, but also explain to the IRS on the return why it's not taxable. So it depends. That question depends on what kind of items you're thinking of.
Awesome. Thank you so much for questions.
Okay, I want, how much should you pay to file a tax return? For low income clients, I'm saying nothing. I really believe this should be nothing. There are, you can go to irs.gov and get a bunch of different companies that will file for free for you. Like, I don't know if TurboTax, but anyways, there's a bunch of different companies that will, you can use their online software like TaxAct, and they'll file for free. These companies, and they were caught just a few years ago, where you go to their website and they would say you could file for free, and you get to the end and they want to charge you before they file. And the IRS cracked down on that. Well, I just found, I was trying to help my nanny prepare her tax return last week using one of these services, and wouldn't you know, we could not file it unless she paid them $49. That is wrong. So I went to a different site and we got it filed for free for her. So be very careful. If somebody's has an AGI of less than $73,000, they should not be, and they're going to file themselves, they should not be paying anybody. This is for free. So know that. There's also these VITA sites. You can Google and find them. There's this website. This is for people who make generally $60,000 or less. You can go to the VITA site. There's a few, like for example, in Miami, they're all over. And this is even better if you're not comfortable preparing to, doing your own tax return online. Then these VITA sites will have qualified people help you do simple returns for free. Wow, I didn't realize I got 5 minutes, but let me see. This is like a whole nother talk here about what to do when somebody owes money to the IRS.
You're okay, Karen. I know you have a bandwidth and you have a baby that's nearby and you have things to do, but folks will hang on or get the recording, so don't feel rushed.
Yeah, no offense, but when you drop off, let me just cover the big points of the rest of the stuff I put on here. So if somebody owes money to the IRS, what then? There's a lot of options. Before doing anything, I recommend getting the account transcripts, because you do not want to take any action to resolve a tax debt with the IRS until you know, 1, when the tax return was filed, 2, whether the amount that the IRS says is owed is correct. Is it from an audit? Is it from a return that was actually filed? Is that return accurate? Is it a return that the client, the taxpayer, actually filed, or is it a fraudulent return? How much of the balance relates to penalties? Is there a basis for penalty relief because of reasonable cause? When are the statute of limitations on collections expired? Like I said earlier, you don't want to do an offer in compromise if some of these balances are going to fall off the books very soon. These are all things you need to know before you determine, before you try to help a client get on an installment agreement. But okay, say there's no dispute as to the amount that's owed, then you can get on an installment agreement, meaning paying monthly. You could do an offer in compromise. This is where you offer to settle the debt for less than the amount owed. Currently not collectible status. This is where someone cannot even afford to pay anything monthly, and the IRS agrees. They say, okay, it's still on the books, you still owe the tax, but we agree that for the time being, you cannot afford to pay, and we'll accept that. We may file a lien, we'll keep the liens in place to secure our interest in anything, but we are not going to levy your bank accounts and your wages in the meantime. But every year, a couple of years or so, we may come back and ask you to give us an update on your financial situation so that we can determine whether you're still currently not collectible. You could also, there's bankruptcy. Yes, some taxes are dischargeable in bankruptcy. So it's important to speak with a tax attorney or bankruptcy attorney who can advise you how much of the tax would be dischargeable in bankruptcy. It's also a timing issue. Before filing bankruptcy, if you expect that taxes are going to be discharged, you need to make sure you know the date that those taxes become dischargeable. I've seen people come to me, they say, well, I filed bankruptcy last year, these taxes should have been discharged. I look at the account transcripts and realize, if you would have waited 10 days to file your bankruptcy petition, you could have had these taxes discharged. So it's important someone know the date, the earliest date you could file bankruptcy for taxes to be discharged. There's also innocent spouse relief. That's another COE, and that's something that will come up a lot in divorce cases. So if the balance is a result of a tax return that was filed and it's inaccurate, say if you owe too much, like if it overstated the amount owed, you can always file an amended return. If someone filed a joint return with their spouse, they cannot later file a separate return. That's the problem. If someone filed a separate return and were married, they can later say, hey, let's file an amended return jointly, because usually the taxes are less if they file jointly. What if the balance due is due to fraud? Then, like, say if someone filed a fraudulent return, technically that's not a valid return. So you can always file a return after that. For example, say there was a married filed jointly return, but the spouse didn't actually sign it. Or maybe they were forced to sign it. So if it's fraud or a forged signature, then you can argue that it wasn't a valid return, and thus you should be able to file married filing separately. If the balance is a result of an audit, a lot of people will go in and say, oh, just file an amended return. Usually not the way to fix things. I know a lot of accountants want to fix things by just filing amended returns. That's not like the silver bullet for fixing things. You can request audit reconsideration. There's procedures online about how to do that, who qualifies for audit reconsideration. If it's timely, you can file a tax court petition. Something I want to advise is do not be scared of the idea that a taxpayer has to go to tax court. It is the most friendly court and accessible court that I can imagine. $60 filing fee. It's waived for low income taxpayers. There's tons of resources in the case that someone needs to file a tax court petition. If someone gets a notice that gives them tax court rights, I urge them to exercise them. A lot of people will say, I don't want to go, I don't want to litigate. It's too complicated to go to tax court. It is the only way to preserve your rights. And you'll see people get audited and get a notice of deficiency, which gives them the option to go to tax court, and their accountant or someone will say, just file an amended return. That will not fix things. The only way to certainly get to the right answer is to file a tax court petition. Didn't realize that this really is a couple talks in one. This will be impossible to get through. All of these slides are available to you. So you're
We
welcome.
are always happy to have
Yeah.
multiple parts. So, after in a few
Yeah,
months.
there is another speech here explaining how to resolve balances with the IRS. Yeah, in the innocent spouse relief, I didn't even get into that, and that is a really important item for individuals who've gone through a divorce and may owe joint tax liabilities. Because you can go through divorce and you can have the family court judge say, okay, husband, you're gonna pay X amount of the joint debt. Wife, you're gonna pay this amount of the joint tax debt. The IRS doesn't care. And they can go after either the husband or wife or both for 100% of the tax until it's paid in full. The IRS does not have to give any credence or deference to an order of a state court. So know that, like, that's one of the biggest problems. If I can't say, hey, my husband agreed to pay the tax in our divorce. It's a factor that helps in getting relief from joint liability, but it's not dispositive. So anyway, know that this innocent spouse relief exists. It's not easy to get, but certainly there's plenty of situations where a spouse should request it. It's a way to get relief from a joint liability. Yeah, so that again is a separate topic. So sorry I couldn't get through everything, but I'd be happy to do another talk on any specific issues at another time, Alexis.
I appreciate that. And so, folks who are on here, you have my email address. It's in the chat. And you know who I am, most of you, because you're in the legal aid community. What we'll do is we will send out the slides and, a copy of this recording and the CLE credit. And if there's something that you think would be helpful to your practice to come back and maybe do another session on or expand on, email me. Let me know. I can always, talk to Karen and see if she has the bandwidth to do it. And we'll see if it's something that we can put on for you.
Again, yeah, don't try to navigate these questions by yourself. There are plenty of attorneys who could use some pro bono work. Just don't know how to help. So if you need to get connected with these people, let me know.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Karen. And so for folks, I will say, Karen, you're receiving a lot of accolades in the chat saying this was honestly amazing. Thank you so much. This was very helpful. Excellent presentation. Like I said, Karen, earlier, this is a topic that we as legal aid attorneys just really don't ever get enough training on. So we're very, very thankful for the time that you took to teach us. And your willingness to come back if there's something that we feel might be helpful. And with that being said, I did drop the CLE code into the chat. Someone said, can we do a statewide VITA training, VITA training? I'll write it down. The CLE code is in the chat. It is 2301430, N as in Nancy. It's also, I typed it into the Q&A. And for all the folks that are here, you will receive an email. That email will come from Zoom, not my email address. That email will have a copy of the recording, the CLE information, a copy of the slides in PDF form for you to look at, and it will have my contact information. For those who may miss that in their inbox, check your spam. If it doesn't go through to your spam, my email address is up at the top of the chat. It's alexis.alvarez@floridalegal.org. You can always reach out to me directly and I'll send you all of the materials, directly myself. And so with that being said, Karen, thank you so much. Is there any last minute thing that you wanted to say before we log off?
No, I'm here. If you guys need anything, and I'm happy to connect you to resources to make this stuff easier. Because again, I start talking and I'm realizing I need a whole hour on this little tidbit to really explain it correctly. So
that's the professor in you. And as a former alumni of UM Law myself, I'm very, very happy to have been able to attend this masterclass. All right, folks. Well, have a wonderful day. Karen, thank you for everything.
Good luck this week.
Thank you. I'm due any day now. So have a wonderful day and we'll talk soon, and everybody have a wonderful rest of your afternoon.
Take care. Bye-bye.